videoing, recording this. And so if anyone has any issues with that, please do let us know before it sort of goes viral on YouTube, which it will. Which group, do you want to tell me which group shall we start off with then, Gwyneth? Because I don't have the list in front of me. Okay. Who would like to come down? And I know there was one about working abroad, wasn't there?
Yes, there may not be many.
Okay, right, okay. What about then, shall we talk about the one that I was in? Because I know that some people will be willing to say something. So it's next steps with our career. So, Jennifer, would you like to just briefly tell everyone about, no, can you shout or would you like a mic?
This is mic.
That's a mic, is it switched on now?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Making a difference? Making a difference?
Can you hear? I'll see if it's...
I'll speak louder, that's fine.
Yes. It's on.
Is it?
Well, there's a mic.
It's just a bit too quiet.
It's just a bit...
Okay.
Well,
I'll speak loudly, it's fine. Is that loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone here? Okay, well, we are looking at the next steps in our career, and there was quite a large group of us. So, actually, the majority of our discussion session was kind of hearing what other people have been doing and which stage in their career they're at now. I think one of the big points that I found from that discussion group and also from the discussion groups yesterday, and I was in the working abroad and also the general issues in mathematics yesterday, I think one of the biggest things I've learned from the discussion group so far has probably been to exploit the meeting of new people and to network in these kind of events, meet people who are in a position that you might want to get in contact with later on, and to get people's contact details, because actually listening especially yesterday in fact to how people have progressed in their careers, that is a big key point. Most people have said, I haven't followed a normal route, this is what I did, and that mainly involved having spoken to people at conferences and things, kind of getting in contact with them and getting your name out there and your reputation of, I want to do this and this is the kind of thing I'm interested in. So that's probably the biggest thing. We also today talked about how if you're doing something very specific in your PhD or in a postdoc, then it's not impossible to change the field that you're in. I mean, if you want to move from applied to, say, statistics, or even into a more pure area, you can do that. You just, again, need to talk to the right people and demonstrate your interest. What have I missed out? We also talked about a couple of issues with maternity leave PhDs, and I guess that's kind of suitable because this is the Women in Maths conference. And so, yeah, there have been difficulties, especially abroad, when it comes to having maternity leave, and how that's kind of affecting your career. But then I'm not sure how authorised I am to talk about that, because I've had a lot of different experiences and it's varied certainly from person to person, but there are other people who are experiencing the same thing out there. And again, it's about talking to people who are in the know and kind of getting help from all your fellows.
The point is to perhaps look at the issues of if you have a baby at a certain time in your career from being, say, a PhD student, postdoc, etc., what are the implications for you in terms of, do you get maternity leave? If you're on a research contract, is that time added on to the end of your contract, etc., etc., and there seems to be some disparity across different countries, and again, it's something for us to bear in mind, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So one of the other things which I thought was, so you can have a fairly standard traditional career progression, but there are people who don't necessarily fit into that mould, and I think probably more women than men. And so, for example, we heard, so one of the members of the group who has been beavering away pursuing her own independent research. What are the options available to her? Very keen to do research, but doesn't not able to get a permanent position, and there doesn't seem any natural vehicle for people like that who are keen. They've been doing some research, but they want to make a next step, and it's not obvious to me as to what that next step could be and or what funding mechanisms are available for that. So perhaps something that we might want to consider. I mean, we have small with LMS fellowships, but these don't necessarily say for returning people trying to restart their careers. So whether or not we want to think a bit more about that. And I think another tension thing that we heard quite a lot was, as you're thinking about, do I stay on to do a postdoc? Do I look for a lectureship? It's, am I good enough? Would I be better suited to a job in industry or some other sort of career? And it's kind of a difficult decision to make. And I think one of the things that I believe is coming through is having opportunities during a PhD to actually work in industry for a few months. And I know BBSRC are doing this. Can't quite remember. I think EPSRC might be thinking about it. But it would at least give you an idea of what a different career might look like. If you're on this sort of university education sort of treadmill, it's very difficult to take time out and see whether or not you might be happier somewhere else. And again, I think it just helps you to make a better decision. Equally, if you make a decision, it's not the end of the world if it's not the right one. You can still make, your career is long enough to be forgiven for getting something wrong. You will progress, and so you shouldn't worry too much if at one stage you think you've made the wrong decision. In the long term, it will not have been the wrong decision. You learn from each of those transition points. Sorry, any other things?
Just a note about leaving academia, and just to expand on that, I mean, there are people here, can't spot of Patricia, for example, who have left academia and then come back in, and it is something that you can do, and you are able to do it, and just to not be scared to take that step, because nothing's set in stone. And anything that you want to do, you can probably end up doing again, as long as you want to do it enough. So if you want to leave academia, that's not closing the door behind you. You can still come back. And likewise, if you progress further in your academic career, you can still go into industry at some later point, if that's what you want to do.
Oh, that just reminds me. So one other thing that we discussed was what was necessary to be, to stay on in academia, and someone had been told, oh, you're not obsessed enough about your maths to stay on. And so I disagree that you need to be totally obsessed. I think you can have a life apart from maths and still be successful. And so I think we spent some time discussing this, and I think there was a comment that, in fact, was it Jenny who said something? She sat on some committee, and so there was the question of whether or not women tended to be more likely to have an outside interest that was quite time-consuming than men. And I said I didn't agree with that. I didn't think that was gender-specific. I thought it was equally prevalent to men and women, but it might be something that it would be interesting to know whether there was any gender differential there. I guess it's not, but it was something that we did talk about. Is there anything else? Does anyone have any questions or any things you'd like to ask? No? Does anyone from the other discussion groups, would you like to come on down and share with us some pearls of wisdom or some reflections? Yes, thank you.
Just say some information from the funding group.
Yes.
Applied for grants. We had specific questions about, mostly they were about people's specific situations, so I don't think it's relevant really to go through those here, and I hope we managed to help some of the people. I just want to say that the PDFs of the talks we had yesterday about UK funding and EU funding will be sent by email to all participants here, so I think that's going to be helpful to you. And in your LMS pack, you've got a little leaflet about the LMS grants. Gwyneth wants me to say that they have a high success rate. That's a good thing. All right, I think that's just all I'll say. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else from any of the other discussion groups? Yes,
Well, I
go for
was
it.
on the working overseas group, and I guess it was merged with another one. And I'd like to say that we more or less talked about the same things as you did
Good,
here.
good, great.
And
minds.
also, sometimes it's important to look on insurance issues when you travel abroad, when you want to live abroad, on maternity leave issues, on whether you can bring your partner with you or not. So things you have to consider before you go and live in another country. And yeah, I think that was the most important one.
So I think that making the most while you're young and you can travel, I mean, that's one of the nice things about academia. It's a great way to go and travel around and see the world, and that's a really enriching both academically but also socially and culturally. I wish I had done it when I was younger. I think it, and now it becomes difficult when your kids are of a certain age. Hey ho. But I think it's a brilliant thing to do, and for you guys, the world is it's a much more smaller place, and you should really make the most of those opportunities that are available to you. It's a brilliant thing to do, it really is. Anyway, so any other? Yes.
I'm going to say just one message, but so I sat through the balancing work and family group yesterday, and I was supposed to lead the discussion today, but we merged with good practice. Well, I won't share any specific advice. I'm just saying that the general message is that we heard different experiences of different women who balanced, and at some point maybe you will all get to the point where you may want to have a family, and the only message is that it is possible to find a good balance between the two, even though it's hard, and there are some years when one has to juggle, as we saw in nice picture of them, you have to juggle between these different things. And it's good to hear what other people have done, and you always, I think it's good to networking and ask around, and we heard during our discussion groups, we heard different ways of trying to, different advice, but there's no universal solution. So sometimes everyone has to find their own way. There is no right moment to have children. There is no right way of having childcare or whatever. But the message is that, it's a personal solution, but it can be found. And even if it's hard, it's possible. And there are successful examples. That's all what I wanted to share with.
Which is why it's lovely if you're in a department where there's not so many other women to talk to. It's lovely to come to a grouping like this, even if you don't have the same mathematical backgrounds, just to hear what people have done and how they've gotten there. And yeah, you're right, there is no right and wrong answer, and you adapt to what life throws in front of you. When you have kids, there's no right and wrong answer. It happens, and you get on with it, and you survive, and the children survive, and they grow up, and they will be reasonably well balanced, you hope. Sorry, do you want? I can see them coming down the wings at me. They're coming to back me up.
On the computer, that's all.
Okay. Any other comments that people would like to make about the? So, did you find the discussion groups? Was it useful? Were they what you expected they would be? Were they quite lively? Good, that's the right answer. Be a little flaw coming up. So, shall we move on now? Right.
They want us to.
Okay, I think that's